This is Ideal Health Solutions, the podcast with Dr. Timothy L. Brown. All right, welcome to Ideal Health Solutions, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Timothy Brown, and today's episode is something truly special. We're diving into a story of courage, raw, lived, and hard-earned. Not the polished Instagram version of courage, but the kind that comes from walking straight into danger, uncertainty, and transformation. Our guest today, John Graham, has lived a life that challenges the limits of what any of us might imagine possible. At age 16, he shipped out on a freighter. At age 19, he hitchhiked through the Algerian Revolution. At 20, he joined the team that made the first and only ascent of the Denali North Wall. He traveled the globe as a war correspondent, serving 15 years as a U.S. Foreign Service officer, and later risked his career at the United Nations to push for peace, including efforts that helped end apartheid in South Africa. And for the past 42 years, John has dedicated his life to the Giraffe Heroes Project, inspiring people around the world to stick their necks out to solve public problems. Today, we're exploring the lessons behind a life lived boldly, how courage built, how it evolves, and why the world needs it now more than ever. Let's jump in today. All right, John, welcome to the show. We really appreciate you for coming on and sharing your story. We're excited to have you on.
Oh, I'm excited to be here too, Timothy. Yeah, I really am. This is cool.
But what's one thing that if you could say, this is really keeping me up at night, what would you say?
Well, the damn Mariners didn't win the World Series.
Absolutely. Hey, we'll root for them next year.
Right, I'll give you a better answer than that. What keeps me, I don't think anything keeps me up at night. You know, I'm 83 years old. I've seen and done
That's
damn
awesome.
near. I can't really be surprised a whole lot. I'm not very happy with the world and the nation's political situation right now, but it doesn't keep me up at night. I get up the next morning and say, what can I do? Damn it, what can I do?
Absolutely.
I said about trying to do it.
I think that's the best thing. And I think that when we're coming to that question, I always ask people that, and most people respond exactly how you said. Hey, I'm not really disturbed by it. Like, it's not keeping me up at night. But if I could change it, that's definitely one of the areas that I would work with. Yes, there is a lot going on politically across the board that's affecting hundreds of millions of people. But I think the most important thing is we all have a space that we can kind of function in and we can do things. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you've done to transform others' lives across the board. But I want to start at the beginning, John. You've had more brushes with death than most people will have close calls in lifetime. When you look back, is there one moment, one close call that changed you, something that really shook you awake or shifted your overall perspective?
Yeah, Tim, with my life has been more than one, but for two for sure. And we can get into them in more detail. I'm sure we
Absolutely.
will. But one of them was at the height of a battle in Vietnam, and
oh wow!
Second one was almost dying in a cruise in a sinking, burning ship in the Gulf of Alaska in a typhoon. So there were comeuppance moments. But this program is about courage, and I guess I want to say right up front, because you started by talking about my early experiences. I'm lucky to be alive, man, and I faced a violent death. I don't know, at least a dozen times, walked away from all of it. But what I want to say is that courage comes in many different shapes and forms. And for the first part of my life, what was important was physical courage, and man, I had a lot of that. I did all kinds of things, one adventure after the other.
Yes.
But I was living on an adrenaline rush, Tim. It wasn't necessarily oriented toward other people at all. It was oriented toward my own wish to have one adventure after the other, each one more dangerous and difficult than the one before. So you mentioned I started off at a very early age. Yeah, I was 16, just 17 years old when I got a job working on a cargo ship going to the Far East and back. And I grew up in a very placid, nice little American city, Tacoma, Washington. Nothing ever happened there, and nothing ever probably would happen. I had a very loving family, but nothing happened there either. And I'm sure I was expected to go to the University of Washington like my dad and
Yeah.
my sister had, and marry the girl next door and settle down, and that would be it. And that all got busted up that summer when I was 17, and I went to see uh,
Mm-hmm.
Prater because this is way back when. I mean, I'm old as dirt, man, and this was when there were no container ships. These were great big cargo ships, and
Wow.
they were run by 50 or 60 really tough guys, with muscles and tattoos and stuff. They took one look at me and they said, "Oh Jesus, this kid doesn't know but nothing. He grew up in
Yeah.
a town where nothing happens. He's never hardly been out of home. We're going to teach him some life lessons that he'll never get in school."
That is hilarious.
And I know this is a family broadcast, so I won't be explicit as to what all those life lessons were. A summer at sea with these seamen. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, it changed my. Actually that was the first thing. It changed my life completely. Here, I grew up in this nothing ever happened town, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden I'm with these guys, and they're determined to teach me these life lessons. Actually, the first one started rather badly. I was out on deck
Wow.
first or second night, and one of the crewmen comes up to me and starts making sexual advances, and another
Wow.
crewman, an enormous black guy from the engine room, his name was Roy, and Roy grabbed this first guy, slammed him up against the bulk, beat the shit out of him, and then
Wow.
coming out of Roy's mouth was the most incredible string of cussing I'd ever heard.
I can only imagine.
Oh man! And I'd never seen real violence before, and I
Yeah.
decided, oh man, that's what I want to do. Because my own dad, I mean, I love my dad, of course, but
Mm.
he was about the most placid and passive guy you'd want, and he got pushed around and bullied all the time. He got
Wow.
passed over by promotions down in the newspaper where he worked, and at the same time, I was being bullied in school, and I was looking for a role model, how to be a man, and
Wow.
my own father was not that role model at all. But all of a sudden, here was Roy on the freighter. The freighter, its name was the Golden Bear. And so I went back down to my cabin that night after this incident with Roy, and I practiced putting imaginary foes up against the wall and beating the shit out of them and trying to cut like Roy. Anyway, that whole summer completely changed my life. I realized that the world was a whole lot bigger, more colorful, more dangerous, more interesting
Abs-
than Tacoma, Washington. And I also realized that I now had a model of manhood that seemed to really
Yeah.
work, and it was a model of physical violence. Uh, and so I really wanted to do that. And so the rest of the summer, I mean, we were roaming around the Philippines and Hong Kong and Japan and wherever.
Mhm.
And it was an incredible eye opening experience. And it truly changed my life. So then when we got
Wow.
back, you already alluded to some of this stuff. I mean, 2 years later, I'm in, I'm hitchhiking. I'm in college now, and I'm hitchhiking in Europe, and I'm at the youth hostel in Zermatt, and in Switzerland, and I see a newspaper that says that there's a war going on just a few hundred miles south because Algerian rebels were trying to take control of the country from the French colonials who were in
Wow.
had been in charge for a long time. And so I said to myself, "Hey, I've never been in a war before. That sounds interesting." So
Why not, right?
yeah, man, I hitchhiked down through Morocco. I stepped across the border. There's a war going on, so there's no border controls. I stepped across into Algeria, but at least I'm smart enough to put an American flag on my chest so that the rebels won't think I'm French and shoot me. But I didn't have worried because the rebels were really kind, and they would even stop cars going in my direction at gunpoint and tell the driver to take me where I wanted to go. So I stayed for a while with French Foreign Legionnaires and rebel bands and stuff, just roaming through this bloody war going on.
Wow.
And I came away without a scratch. But it really confirmed for me that this is the kind of life I wanted.
Man,
Wow.
what do you feel that the purpose was, if you could
Oh, I no, I
pinpoint it?
it's very clear then what the purpose was. The purpose was how to be a man. Purpose was how to be a man.
That's
And
big.
and my imagery was Roy and the on that ship, the Golden Bear, and my image was the French Foreign Legionnaires who
Wow.
who with a few pistols think they were going to take off the entire rebel army. And at the same time, I was in college, and I was rowing, crew, small boats, and so
Hmm.
I put on like 30 pounds of muscle. So all of a sudden, I had a body now that was quick, and I wasn't gonna. No one shoved me around anymore. So I then looked for one adventure after the other, uh,
Absolutely.
and the bigger and better and more dangerous. And you alluded to the fact that a year after that Algerian experience, I was
Correct.
a team of guys that made this first ascent of one of the most dangerous mountain faces on the whole planet.
Climbing. I just want to know, what was the transition period for that?
Well, I was a college kid in these years, and so I told you I went through the war in Algeria because I saw
Hmm.
a newspaper story, uh, and then I also discovered that I liked to hike, I liked the outdoors. That was pretty tame. I wanted to do serious mountain climbing, hanging from ropes and where it was difficult and dangerous. So I was with this group of guys, and we took on this horrendous task of being the first to climb this mountain wall that was maybe the most dangerous face on earth. And the climb has never been repeated because it's so dangerous.
Hmm.
And we made this first ascent. It took us over a month. We dodged avalanches, dodged crevasses, survived falls, and we walked away from it. So all this time, I began to be totally convinced that I was invulnerable. Now,
Hmm.
a lot of young people, young men especially, maybe you and certainly me, think
Yeah.
we're vulnerable. But I took that belief to an absurd extent. I really thought I couldn't be killed, and so I kept
Correct.
waiting to one adventure after the other, and I kept surviving. So I kept doing more and more difficult things. So I graduated college, and I set out to hitchhike around the world, not the ocean, of course, but back across the land masses.
Yeah.
And I got a job as a stringer, a reporter for the Boston Globe.
Wow.
Reported on every war I came across, which in those years was, as I remember, in Cyprus, Laos, Vietnam, the beginning of the war in Vietnam, uh, etc. And I walked through all of it. Then
Hmm.
I'm sitting there at the end of at the first part of this journey. I'm down in Australia, and I have to make a decision because I'm not independently wealthy, and yet it's clear
Correct.
to me that what's meaningful to me. Now, mind you, I'm still hooked on this idea of courage being totally physical. I didn't give a you know
Yeah.
what about anybody else. I didn't care about peace or justice or anything. I just wanted for adventure. So
Hmm.
how can I provide for that habit? And that's what it was. Adrenaline was my drug
Mm.
of choice. Uh, how can I provide for it? And I got a job in the U.S. Foreign Service, but it wasn't wearing fancy clothes in embassies in Europe. I worked in the
Hmm.
Foreign Service in the sort of the nasty end of it, and a lot of it in jungles and deserts, wars and revolutions. I was in the middle, for example, of the revolution in Libya when a guy named
Mm.
Muammar Gaddafi came to power, and I absolutely loved it, Tim. I absolutely loved it. Everybody else at the embassy in Tripoli was freaking out. But the instant I saw cars burning in the streets and rock throwing mobs,
Mm.
I was in my element. Ooh, I love
Yeah.
that. And I performed really well. I mean, in a limited sort of way, I was really brave. I had a lot of courage, and I was indestructible. So the State Department loved me because I was what they wanted me to do, and everybody else was freaking out. So then after that, of course, I walked away from the revolution in Libya, and I asked the State Department to send me to Vietnam. Not only that, I said, send me to the most difficult and dangerous assignment you got over there, and they did. And I became the advisor to the city of Hue in the northern part of what was then South
Hmm.
Vietnam,
Wow.
only 50 miles away from the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. then separated North Vietnam from the South. And it was a hell of a dangerous place to be,
I can
especially
imagine.
I was there mostly after Kissinger and Nixon had made a deal to withdraw American troops.
Mm-hmm.
Have any protection. I mean, it used to be the 101st Airborne would save my ass if I got into trouble, but they went home. So I was with a couple of other civilians, 50 miles from the DMZ. And when the North Vietnamese decided to attack in 1981, the so-called Easter Offensive, they damn near surrounded the city where I was, and there were no American troops to protect me. And there was a big battle, and it looked like I was going to be captured or killed. And my job at that time was to create a stable base area in the middle of this conflagration of the city. It was no easy task because the South Vietnamese army had basically cut and ran. They were poorly led and incompetent. And so the North Vietnamese were closing in, I mean, only a few miles from the city gates. And my job was to get ammunition to the few remaining South Vietnamese troops who were still fighting. And I couldn't do that because the city had been taken over by looters from the South Vietnamese forces. And so they had burned the marketplace. So this heavy pall of greasy smoke hung over the city, and artillery was booming, and people were screaming, and most of the population were fleeing south on the one road left open to Da Nang to the south. It was just like a scene from, Kafka. It was just a horror, unbelievable. And there was no protection. There were just four of us civilians trapped in the city. And that's when I knew that unless something happened, man, I was done for. But it so happened that the clouds lifted the next morning, and American fighter jets saved my butt by blasting the North Vietnamese divisions outside of the town. But there was a comeuppance, and this is that first. You asked me for that moment. Well,
that moment, yeah.
That moment, Tim, happened that night. Before the clouds had cleared, before the fighter jets had saved my butt. I sat down and looked at this conflagration, and I realized that all of a sudden, that here I was 8,000 miles from home. I knew the war was lost. I knew the war was stupid. I knew it was unwinnable. I knew it was wrong. And I didn't care. I wasn't there as a patriot. I was there for the adrenaline. And I didn't care what happened to other people. I must say, I mean, some of your viewers may cringe, but in a sense, I didn't even really care who won. I was there for the adventure. And all of a sudden, and all this crashing and booming and bullets flying on artillery shells, it suddenly hit me how shallow my life had become. And it took that long. I was 28 years old then, right? I wasn't a kid. And I suddenly realized, looking back 28 years, how shallow my life had become. And it's like, I can't, all of a sudden I realized I couldn't go on that way. That my living a life that shallow, that not caring about other people, not caring about broader events, just living for my own adventuring was something that was very, very wrong, and it was wrong with me. And I in the middle of that battle, I remember.
John, I think I lost you.
But I came back to California and started to climb out of that self-centered hole.
That's amazing, John. Like, I mean, I don't even know where to start. I mean, you've given the trek all the way through, but now you're in this hole. You came out of this hole. Okay, I'm selfish. I want to kind of focus. I want to refocus. That defining moment really helped to shape where you wanted to go. Where'd you go from there in that moment? How did you make that turnaround? Because I think a lot of people may be trying to wonder, okay, I might be in a similar situation, figuratively speaking, of course, but how do I make that shift? What's the first step I take if I want to make that transition and be courageous?
Well, like I say, I was courageous in a very limited sense. I mean, I was
Mm-hmm.
brave and tough and stuff. So I survived Vietnam, and the State Department, as a reward for my not getting killed in Vietnam, sent me to Stanford in California for a year, kind of a sabbatical. And it was great because I was a mess. I not only had what we might now call PTSD, uh, I mean, I would walk on the shadow sides of the street in Palo Alto, California, to avoid sniper fire. I ducked behind a car whenever a traffic helicopter
Mm-hmm.
would fly over. But the key thing wasn't the PTSD. The key thing was this revelation that I
Mm-hmm.
felt during that battle in Vietnam about how shallow my life had become. And it turned out that in those years in California, there were things called encounter groups. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you sat down with 12, 15, 18 other people and you spilled your guts in attempts to put more meaning into your life and to
Mm-hmm.
figure out serious life problems. Well, it turned out that that encounter group was really important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I met with a group of men at a week-long retreat in the Santa Cruz Mountains south of San Francisco. And I began by telling them all that I was the John Wayne personified. I told them all my war stories and what a great guy I was, and how the rest of them were, accountants and graduate students or whatever, had
Mm-hmm.
never faced anything like I had faced. And they listened politely. And then they says, yeah, we get who you think you are, but we're trying to tell you that from a week of being with you, we think you have a heart, and we think you buried that heart, like
Mm-hmm.
almost as if you'd slammed and nailed a big piece of plywood across your chest. You can't feel your heart anymore. All you can feel is the adrenaline rush. And it's phony, John. It's phony.
Wow.
Because deep inside, if you could rip that heart, that plywood off, you might discover a complete human being. And I thought that's how could you dare say that? Because I'm John Wayne. I'm not you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I ran out of this little cabin where this meeting was taking place and ran down this path. And I hadn't gone but half a mile when I realized that these guys had all been right.
Yeah.
I thought about all the softness of my life, from playing with my little doll Sammy when I was 5 years old,
Yeah.
to really caring about other things. And I thought, yeah. I mean, I am a different person. But how can I get to that person? And you talked
Mm-hmm.
about the moment. Well, it
Yeah.
wasn't a moment. It was like 7, 8 years. I mean, it took me a long time to climb out of that hole. And I began by establishing relationships with people, including my own two children at that time, and with community groups. And I made some friends, and I began to look outside of myself and to see that maybe I might find more meaning from stopping wars and revolutions than starting them.
That's good.
Maybe with all of my talents, I was smart and I was tough. Maybe I could help tackle some of these awful peace and justice issues in the world, especially in Africa and Asia. And so, like I say, I'm slipstreaming here, but because this took a
Mm-hmm.
long time, and there was 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
That's
But I
good.
gradually began to shift the whole focus of my life. And then the State Department did something else that was really beneficial, although I can't credit them. It just happened. They sent me to the United Nations in the mid 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and where I had a chance to look at the entire planet and to see all these peace and justice issues,
Mm-hmm.
poverty, disease, over most of the planet. All the black and brown peoples of the planet in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
and the U.S. didn't really give a damn about any of that. All our
Mm-hmm.
concern was fighting the then Soviet Union in the Cold War. But I cared. I began to see, as I traveled around the world, I began to see the third world, Africa and Asia, in a new light. I began to see the suffering, and I began to think that, damn it, with my talents and skills, and the fact that I'm indestructible, I can make a
Mm-hmm.
difference here. And
That's
so I began
good.
to fight back, even to the point of going way, way beyond where my own government wanted me to go. And
Mm-hmm.
so I began taking risks, all right. And here, the transition to a different type of courage appeared. The courage that it took to do what I did then which was in some cases double cross my own government.
Wow.
For example, in South Africa, there was as you alluded, there was a system of racial oppression called apartheid, where a white minority was domineering a black majority and treating them terribly, beating, jailing, killing. And we were supporting that because there was so much money to be made in South Africa. The whole Western world, Africa, in America and Europe, was looking the other way. We were saying all the things about how awful apartheid was. We weren't doing a damn thing about it. I resolved to end it. And I saw, because I wasn't no dope, that a key thing was ending the supply of guns and military ammunition, military equipment to the South African military and police. So I began double crossing my own government, because my own government was, like I say, turning a blind eye. And there were a whole lot of racists then in the American Senate who were supporting American gun runners. Why? Because of all the money to be made. So America was running guns to South Africa. The European countries were too. The Africans were getting really pissed about it for a very good reason. The Africans, that is to say, in the United Nations. And I kept feeding the Africans in the Security Council private, secret information on who was running the guns and which senators were the most hypocritical and racist. And they used this ammunition to hammer my own government. I mean, I once saw a cable from, in those days it was cables, no internet. I once saw a cable from an African foreign minister to my boss, the American foreign minister, Secretary of State, in which this minister was complaining bitterly about American hypocrisy, of saying all the right things and yet doing everything it could to support apartheid because of all that money to be made. And in the middle of his message were a couple sentences that I myself had drafted 2 or 3 before. I'd given them to my buddy, an African on the Security Council, who sent them back to his boss in Africa, and they'd come rocketing back in the form of this angry message to the American Secretary of State. So then I go to my own people, my own boss, and say, hey, look, we're looking terrible. We look like total hypocrites. We have to support an arms embargo, an effort to cut off all the supplies of guns and military equipment to South Africa. And I convinced then, because of pressure that I myself had helped generate through slipping these documents to the Africans, diplomats at the United Nations, that the America should finally back this arms embargo, and we did. And so the European nations then had little choice but to follow suit. So the United Nations adopted this arms embargo, cutting off completely the supply of guns and military. It didn't happen overnight, but cutting off that supply really was a huge factor in ending apartheid. So I feel really good about that. But I go back to the question of courage, which is the subject of today's talk. And the courage it took to do that was a different courage than hanging by a rope off a cliff in Alaska or dodging a bullet in Vietnam. It was a moral courage. It was for me to see what the right was, what needed fixing in the world, how to try to end poverty and injustice, and then doing whatever it took, no matter who the hell was standing in my way. And if it was the American government standing in my way, then I would steamroll my way right through the American government. And I could have been fired or I could have been jailed any number of times for the things I did at the United Nations. I finally quit the Foreign Service because, first of all, sooner or later I'd be found out as a double agent that I had become, and fired anyway. At the same time, though, I realized that I couldn't work for any large organization. They were just too slow, too amoral. And by then, I was completely alive, completely motivated by a whole set of motivations. And my courage now was totally focused on taking the risks I needed to take to make the world a better place. And so I fought for that, and I left the United Nations to fight for it on my own. I'll tell you more, but I'm going to stop now because I can feel you got a bunch of
This
questions.
has been amazing. One of the key pieces that I love that you said is in your transition of making that transition to being selfless, to being courageous, and trying to figure things out. That took some years to do, and I think we can't push past that too much. I'm like, many people think, oh, there's an aha moment, and then everything's just going to transition and change. No, you have to do the work. And I think you said a period of about 7 years of you trying to make that transition and moving forward to right some of the wrongs maybe and try to really put the path on that you wanted to go down. I think that's amazing that you were able to understand that it took time to make those transitions.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say, Tim, is that it wasn't like a steady upward. It was a lot of backsliding, and I'll finally get to answer your question about key moments. Because here's the second.
Mm-hmm.
As
Sure.
I said, I left the United Nations, and I was now completely consumed by being an engine of good in the world, um, because I saw all the problems out there, and I knew I could do something to fix them. So I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But I had neglected the fact that I wasn't independently wealthy, and I very soon ran through all the severance pay the State Department had paid me, and I was going broke fast in New York City. So a friend comes up to me and says, "Hey, John, I can see you're going broke fast. You can make a lot of money by lecturing because you've always had a good gift of gab.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can, the people that pay most are cruise ships." I said, "What?" "Yeah,
Wow.
cruise ships. They pay people like you with lots of stories to come on a cruise ship and give little talks to little old ladies and people, elderly people on these cruise ships. And why don't you do that?" So I applied, and I got the very first effort. I got a job lecturing on a cruise ship, small by today's
Wow.
standards, but it was a cruise ship sailing from Vancouver to the Far East. Its name was the Princeton Dam. Uh,
Okay.
so I got to take my then 13-year-old daughter with me, and so Mallory and I board the ship in Vancouver, and it threads its way through the Alaskan waters for 2 or 3 days, showing the people on board the icebergs, glaciers, and stuff. And then it heads out across the Pacific. Well, about 3 days out of Vancouver, that ship is about 140 miles off the Alaskan coast, heading for Japan. And we're woken up in the middle of the night by the captain, or by a voice that says, "We're very sorry, but there's been a fire in the engine room, and of course we put the fire out. But the ship has got some smoke in it, and we're going to turn fans on, and we'll blow the smoke out. But we really want all of you passengers. We're starting in the middle of the night, but come up to the ship's lounge, and we'll give you free drinks and stuff while we take care of the smoke." Well, we're totally disarmed by this. So Mallory and I, with scarcely more than windbreakers,
Mm-hmm.
go up to the ship's lounge along with 550 other people. And we're sitting there in the ship's lounge, and you can't sit there for long because any fool can see that the smoke has not been dispersed. And
Mm-hmm.
in point of fact, the smoke coming up the stairwells was blacker and thicker than when we had come up them. So they've been lying
Wow.
to us. This fire's not been put out.
No.
And so everybody comes out and they're huddled on deck because this is October, mid-October in Alaska. So it's really cold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of the stupid non-warning from the intercom system, nobody has warm clothes. So people are ripping tablecloths off the tables of the lounge, or ripping down curtains to try to stay warm. But any fool can see that the fire has not been put out. So people are getting kind of worried. And now it's
I
like
can imagine.
2 o'clock in the morning. At that moment, the sky is still relatively clear, so you can see the
Mm-hmm.
great band of the northern lights and the smoke coming up on the ship. And then we're finally told we have to go to the stern of the ship. So we all go down to the stern of the ship, and I know this sounds like the movie Titanic.
It really does.
There's an orchestra on the ship. When they assemble the orchestra,
Oh my
and
God.
the orchestra starts playing tunes, it wasn't
Uh,
wasn't near, my God, to thee, Tim. It
Okay.
turns out it was show tunes from Oklahoma.
Okay.
And now the smoke is getting blacker and thicker and coming over the sides of the ship, not just the stairway. And a couple of helicopters have flown 140 miles from the
Mhm.
coast with firefighting gear, and they drop CO2 canisters, and a bunch of really worried-looking guys in firefighting uniforms disappear below decks trying to put the fire out, but they are unsuccessful. And so finally,
Wow.
about 4 in the morning, the captain appears on the deck or on the bridge and says that he's very sorry, but it looks like they haven't been able to put the fire out,
Oh
and
God.
would we all go to our lifeboat stations? So Mallory and I go up to the bow where we were supposed to go in lifeboat number 2.
Hmm.
I asked Mallory to count how many people were going to jam into lifeboat 2, and she says, well, it looks like it's about 85, 90 people, and it says right on
Jeez.
the side of the lifeboat that it's made for 45. Ha!
Yeah.
So we're all getting into that lifeboat. In a sense, it's good that we're packed together like sardines because it helped us stay warm. And so we're looking back, and just as we're about to lower the lifeboats, the fire, which has never been put out, burns through the last of the retaining walls, blows out the glass in the ship's lounge and the ship's dining,
Wow.
and flames 30 feet high leap into the sky.
Jeez.
And I see the flames reflected off my daughter's eyes. And she's a tough little nerd. She's really tough. I can see that she's scared. I'm scared. We're all scared.
Hmm.
She's doing fine. But we get into the lifeboat, and through some miracle, they lower 7 lifeboats without any incident, although one of them
Hmm.
almost tips over. So these lifeboats now are in the water. The ship is burning. The captain and a few other people have stayed behind um, to continue to direct firefighting efforts, which are now become useless.
Hmm.
And the lifeboats begin to drift away from the Princeton Dam. The thing is, however, that we're 140 miles from the coast. A big oil tanker has answered the SOS and come down from Valdez, but the oil tanker, is so huge it can't maneuver to pick up a lifeboat. And the
Hmm.
lifeboats have no motors and
Mm.
no oars, so there's no way for the lifeboats to get to the oil tanker. The only way to rescue people was helicopters. So 3 or 4 helicopters appear flying from bases in the Alaska mainland, and they lower a metal chair at the end of a metal chain.
Hmm.
One at a time, people get out of the lifeboat into that chair, get winched up into the helicopter, and then when the helicopter
Wow.
has 7 or 8 people in it, in other
Has it
words,
done?
full load, it takes them to the deck of the tanker and
Hmm.
deposits them, and then comes back for another 8. So the rescue is going really slowly.
Hmm.
Time is of the essence, Tim, because
Hmm.
a typhoon is coming on, and we knew
Oh
that.
wow.
They had they had distributed seasick pills at dinner the night before. So Typhoon Vernon is coming on, and
Mm.
the skies cloud over, and what was a mild shock starts becoming some serious waves. Um, and the helicopters fly as fast as they can, and they rescue almost everybody. There are only
Hmm.
a few of us left, and some of us are in lifeboat number 2. And out of those 85 people that Mallory saw, well, first of all, I see Mallory rescued. She's the last female, I think, to
Hmm.
go. So it's just 8 guys left in lifeboat number 2. And we're hanging on for dear life. We're all, of course, seasick as dogs. We're
Yeah.
to die of the cold. The sea's getting choppier and choppier, and the weather's getting worse and worse as Typhoon Vernon bears down. Well, the helicopters keep going as fast as they can, but at a certain point, with, like I say, 8 of us left in lifeboat number 2, the helicopters can't fly anymore because it's suicidal to fly a helicopter in a typhoon. So the
Hmm.
helicopters fly off, and our only salvation right then, Tim, is a Coast Guard cutter, small ship,
Hmm.
frantically searching for us in this wild storm. Now,
Wow.
mind you, while the skies have been clear only 7 or 8 hours before, we're in the middle of this typhoon.
Mm-hmm.
Visibility is down to maybe a couple hundred feet. The waves, the swells are 30 feet, which means that this little lifeboat's going up and down 60 feet, 30-foot swells. The winds are gusting over 60 miles an hour. Like I say, we're all seasick as dogs. But the key thing is that we're all dying of the cold, hypothermia. I've
Wow.
seen hypothermia before. I know how it works. You feel
Mm-hmm.
cold, then you go to sleep and you don't wake up, and that's what was happening.
Okay.
We had maybe 6 or 7 hours to live. But the thing is, now
Jeez.
it was getting on evening. Remember, winter,
Mm-hmm.
Alaska. So it was
In
going to get
Alaska.
early. There was maybe an hour of daylight left. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it'd be a miracle if this Coast Guard cutter would find us, because it's crisscrossing this wild ocean looking for us.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a miracle if it found us in the failing light. But once it was dark, we were goners, because we had no flares, we had no
Mm-hmm.
radio, we had no lights, no reflectors, nothing. There was no motor in the lifeboat, so there was no way of signaling.
Mm-hmm.
So once it was dark, we were dead, and I knew that. And so my life came down to that remaining hour.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the answer to a question you asked damn near half an hour ago. What happened? Well, I wasn't a religious person. Still am not a religious person. But damn it, you're caught, and it looks like my luck has finally run out. I've survived death a dozen times. Now the 13th time seems to be, I'm not going to get out of this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I look into this wild storm. Remind you, this is 16 odd winds. This is a serious
Mm-hmm.
storm, and this
Yeah.
little cockle shell of a boat, and we're all bathing like crazy, dying of the cold. And I look up and I say, okay, I better try to pray. I don't know how to do that, but I'll try and pray. And so I look up and I say, all right, whatever your name is, God, I don't get it. I said, I don't get it. I said, here, you know perfectly well that I just helped end apartheid. And I've oriented my whole life toward being a good guy in the world. Yes, I know perfectly well. The first part of my life I'm not too proud of. But I've changed. I really have changed. And I'm doing what I thought was your work. I used to say doing
Mm-hmm.
good in the world. And now I'm being wiped out. It doesn't make any sense. I thought the universe was logical. I went to a Jesuit high school. Like we were taught that the world was logical. Look at a snowflake, all that nice
Yeah.
pattern stuff. And this isn't logical. You're taking what could be a real engine for positive change in the world, and you're wiping me out, and I don't get it. And I got madder and madder until I finally screamed one word at, quote, God. And that one word was, why?
Mm-hmm.
I heard a voice. The other 7 or 8 guys, they didn't hear anything, of course. But I heard a voice, and it was loud, and it was clear.
Wow.
Whether it was the wind, whether it was from God, who knows? But in any case, I heard this voice, and it said, stop kidding yourself. You're lecturing on a cruise ship. You get out of this, you'll lecture on another cruise ship. It's a pretty nice existence, right? And you helped end apartheid. You started doing some good things. And now because you panic over money, you're throwing all that away, and you're not following your own vision. So you might as well die out here, because the next 50 years aren't going to be worth living.
Wow.
Your choice, John. Your choice. I realized then that it was my choice.
Mm-hmm.
I look up into this wild storm and I say, okay. And in that instant, and I know every viewer on this podcast is going to say, oh no, that didn't happen. Well, it did happen.
Yeah.
I say, okay. And in that instant, this Coast Guard cutter, the Boutwell, comes crashing through this wild storm. Would have cut us in two had the lookout not seen us. And so one by one, we're pulled out of the cutter and rescued.
Wow.
So I come back to New York, and I kept my promise to God, to whatever, and I turned my life toward what it has been doing for the last 45 years. I've been an engine for peace and justice, exactly as I said I would. And it so happened at that time that the perfect vehicle for that appeared in the person of the Giraffe Heroes Project. I didn't start it, but a remarkable woman named Ann Medlock, uh, a single mother living in New York City, had founded it. It had nothing to do with the animal giraffes. She called it the
Mm-hmm.
Giraffe Project because it was about finding people sticking their necks out, hence the metaphor, and then telling their stories, and in that way inspiring other people to stick their necks out and help solve public problems. Very simple. The idea's been around for tens of thousands of years. I suspect that Neanderthals used it uh, in order to motivate their people to be heroic and courageous.
Absolutely.
And so that's what Anne was doing. And she started in her apartment in Central Park West. And it was utterly amazing. I thought, oh, this can never succeed. Single mother, Central Park West. She had no resources. I thought I could save the world outside the United Nations by giving marvelous speeches. That was stupid. No one listened. Nobody preached that. But Anne was a storyteller, and she knew the power of story. And I finally caught on because I met Anne about that time, and whether or not I believed in what she was doing, I fell madly in love with her, and we came together and have been husband and wife now for 44 years. But it
That's
became,
amazing.
and I joined her in the Giraffe Heroes Project in the early 80s. And we began finding more and more people sticking their necks out. And we started by creating little 3-4 minute stories about them.
Mm.
We would record their voices, and then Anne would get a star of stage or screen. In those years, it was people like John Denver, others, who would do voiceovers. And she'd create these records. I don't know, Tim. You've got some that don't even know what a vinyl record is.
So true.
There's a flat piece, a flat disc that's round and round on a turntable, and sound comes out.
Exactly.
She'd put these stories on vinyl records and send them out to radio stations. In the beginning, it was only small rinky-dink stations would play them, but it soon caught on. And the Giraffe Heroes Project, she called it, grew like crazy. And she and I were then doing nothing else but working on it, finding people, telling their stories. And we do the same thing today. I mean, now we've honored over 2,000 giraffe in 44 years, and they're all doing marvelous, courageous work from 60 plus countries. And they're working on stuff from gang violence in Los Angeles to crimes against women in Uganda to whatever, every possible problem you could think of. These people are making a difference, and we're telling their stories. And over the years, we've inspired millions of people to follow in their footsteps. We've created a program for young people that goes all the way from kindergarten through high school. I've written 5 books now on meaning and courage. The Giraffe Project is booming. And I think one of my social media handles is Badass Granddad. And it's lovely because they're just little 3-minute segments.
Absolutely.
And I tell one of my adventure stories, and then I follow it up with some life lesson about courage and meaning tied to that lesson. And then I end with a call to action. And it's been incredibly successful. I've been doing it less than a year. I already have 60,000 followers over almost. By Christmas, I'm going to have 1 million viewers. And it's been, people just love it. So I'm doing that. I'm on podcasts like this, which reaches a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Like I say, I've written books. And here I want to get down to the subject of this whole podcast, which is the story of courage. I'm talking about courage, and I talk about courage, and I don't talk about it in the abstract. But I do make it clear that there are different kinds of courage. There's the physical courage I've talked about now for half an hour. But the real courage in anyone's life, my life, your life, is moral courage. And where does that come from? That's the key.
Absolutely.
I think your viewers want to hear. My experience is that moral courage comes from finding the true meaning of your life, the purpose of your life. Everybody wants to find a purpose in your life. I don't care who you are. You look at the mirror in the morning, and who looks back at you from that mirror. You want to know that it makes a difference. You want to know that you're not on this planet just to mark time. That would be like being here like a fancy Swiss watch with no hands on it. There's got to be a purpose to what we're doing. Otherwise, why are we around for 60, 80, 90 years? It doesn't make any sense. But we all look for purpose. In the beginning of my life, I thought I had found the purpose, the meaning of my life through adventuring. And I was satisfied with that for damn near a decade. Then I discovered differently from that battle in Vietnam that
Mm-hmm.
my life didn't come from adventuring, it came from service. And that's where I'm at now, and that's what I teach. That's what my books
It's
teach.
amazing.
That the real source of meaning in life comes through some kind of service. And I'm very quick to say, Tim, I don't mean becoming a saint. I don't mean cloth and ashes. I don't mean like becoming Mother Teresa. You can be of service right where you are, whether you're a
That's good.
barber, neurosurgeon, wherever. I talk to a lot of business audiences, for example, because I love tough audiences, and business audiences tend to be cynical and to dismiss me before I open my mouth. So I get before a business audience, whether it's 5,000 people in a hotel ballroom or 12 people in a C-suite, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell my adventure stories. If I'm given 45 minutes, I'll spend 35, 40 minutes telling my adventure stories. And then when people listening to me understand that I'm nobody's fool, that I've done all these things, that I've taken more risks and done more tough stuff than the whole room full of them put together, they're listening. So in the last 5 minutes, I talk about the pivot in my life, starting
Mm-hmm.
with my battle in Vietnam and going on with a lifeboat experience and what I'm doing now with the Giraffe Project. They're listening to me, and so I challenge them to find the purpose of their life and to find it through some kind of service. And you can stay. You don't have to leave business. You can be of great service in the business world by creating a needed product, building it under fair labor conditions, fair
So true.
environmental conditions, a good friend in the communities where your plants operate. All those things. That's a service. If you're a singer or a movie star or whatever, you're being of service by uplifting people's lives and with
So
your
true.
talent, etc. So all of us can find the service in our lives, and that's what my message is. You find the service, and what that takes is a lot of courage, because after all, let's face it, you start reorienting your life like that, and a lot of your poker buddies are going to say, "Oh, are you kidding me? It's a tough one
Mm-hmm.
out there. Look what's going on in Washington D.C. Those bastards are doing this and they're doing that." Well, yes, they are, but at the same time, you can move in the other direction. You can help make the world a better place by organizing, by getting by writing your Congress people, by
Mm-hmm.
doing demonstrations, by doing all the stuff that you know can help make a difference. And whatever your issue is, whether it's race relations or Gaza or Ukraine or global warming, you can make a difference, and it takes guts to do that, because those poker playing buddies are going to dismiss you, and so you got to keep pressing, even though they say, "Oh, he's lost it, man. Timothy's lost it. John's lost it, man. They've lost it." You keep going, and it takes courage to do that.
Absolutely.
You're going to lose friends, and you're going to have to create whole new communities of allies. That's what I think. And what does it take? 40 minutes now to answer your original question.
Here's the funny thing: you answered every question I had, so I didn't even ask the questions, and you still were able to bring it back to fruition. I really, man, I'm just completely blown away, John, by your life, your story, your ability to tell your story as well. It's inspiring all the same. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your life, your lessons, and the courage that you've learned throughout your entire life. Your story reminds us that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing purpose over comfort and choosing action over apathy. Thank you so much, John. That was completely amazing. How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, I have a website that's got a lot of information on it, and that's my name, johngraham.org. That's
Mhm.
simple. I've written a memoir, if people really want to delve into it, all this stuff, all these stories, and a lot more. It's called Quest, Quest.
Okay.
Subtitle is Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning. Get it at a bookstore, get it from Amazon. It's also available as an audio book for those people that like to do this on their way to work. Um, I welcome emails. I'm at Graham, my last name, Graham at
Mhm.
Giraffe, GIRAFFE.org. What else? The Giraffe Project. Yeah, you showed that. It's
Yeah.
giraffe.org. You can dial into those 2,000 stories. You can read about all the work we're doing overseas, work we're doing with schools. get more information on myself and Ann Medlock and what our vision is for the world. So that's probably more than enough. And like I say, I'm 83 years old. I have no intention. People say, "Oh, well, you'll be retired, man." Whatever I'm retired from, I'm having the time of my life. I'm so much fun doing it. I mean, here you're laughing. I'm laughing. I mean, being
Exactly.
sticking your neck out is fun. Oh yeah, you take some lumps. Oh yeah, there's no question about it that I've got some enemies. I've got some people who think I'm absolutely foolish. I don't care. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and because it fulfills my life, it provides meaning in my own life, and it is the true source of my courage.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, John. And to those that are listening today, that courage isn't reserved for climbers, diplomats, or heroes. It's for all of us. And the world needs more of it, especially now. So if this episode inspired you, please share it with someone who may need a spark of bravery today. And be sure to check out the Giraffe Heroes Project at giraffe.org, as John so graciously mentioned. I'm Dr. Timothy Brown, and this has been another great edition of Ideal Health Solutions, the podcast. See you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow Ideal Health Solutions, the podcast, wherever you listen. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn for more insights on leadership, health, and transformation. Until next time, stay inspired, stay focused, and remember, even in uncertainty, there's opportunity.